So good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Elena Jepai. I'm the Events and Officials Manager at Nordic Canada. We'll be recording today's session, so feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. We'd like to keep this as interactive as possible. I'll also be monitoring the chat box if anyone has any questions. The topic of today's webinar is international competition rules and scenarios and explaining how decisions are made. Mike Norton is our presenter. Mike is a FIS technical delegate. He has been Chief of Comp and TD at World Cups, World Championships, Nationals, and NORAMs. He is also a FIS homologation inspector. Thank you for your attendance and engagement, and over to you, Mike. Thank you for putting this together for us.
Well, you asked me to put it together for you, so
you could have declined, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for that introduction, and I can't see exactly who's on this call or how many people, but I think there's a few on here from around the country, so that's great. Thanks for the introduction there, Elena. I actually have 41 slides. Hopefully it won't take that long, and got a few videos to watch at the end. The whole purpose of this is every year we get together as FIS TDs in North America, and then after that around the world. And this year in particular, there's substantially more rule changes, and some are fairly significant. And we're sitting in these webinars, and I'm saying to myself, this is all great. We have 20 of the top TDs in the world on this call, but there's no coaches and no athletes. And they're either going to find out about the new rules the hard way or the easy way, and or no way at all. So we thought this was a good idea to kind of reach out and get the information out there, and hopefully it flows down to all the athletes out there, and we'll have a great successful season and a boring jury room at our NORAMs. So this webinar tonight, or call it whatever you want, Zoom call, like I said, the main focus is the new rules for the new ICR rules. I will touch on a couple old ones as a refresher, and just go through a couple. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties already here. There we go. Just a couple little things that you may or may not be aware of. For example, like the composition of the jury at FIS races. And so yeah, if you aren't aware already, it obviously composes of the TD, the technical delegate, the assistant technical delegate, chief of competition, who you guys all probably know. The chief of comp is kind of the main overseeing person of the organization, mostly the on snow field of play stuff. And then Nordic Canada race director, which you'll see maybe a couple of different faces this year, hard to say, but in the past, you guys probably all know Dave Dyer, that was him. And this applies to, at the World Cup level as well. They have the FIS race director in place of the Nordic Canada one, obviously. So the role of the TD and the jury, I just want to put this on here, just so we don't just walk around and tell people what to do, or disqualify and drink coffee and whatever. So anyway, first and foremost, this is debatable, depends who you ask, but safety is by far our number one mandate out there. You can have a great race and successful, timing and whatever, but if somebody gets injured, it's usually not good, not a good reflection. At the end of the day, if something gets really sideways and ends up in court, the TD is the one who has signed off, basically. And unfortunately, things do end up in court. It has happened. Applying the FIS rules, that's the ICR. That's this book that we carry around with us. It's our Bible. It's available on the FIS website, but a lot of us like to have the printed copy. Fairness, obviously, that's paramount. I am personally quite big on fairness. It just, that comes down to like trail homologation as well, and all kinds of stuff, that you have to have a fair race. And obviously an overall good event. If we do hear unfortunate stories about events that don't go so well, And I always ask, who was the TD? Like, what happened? What came off the rails? Was it Mother Nature? Was it somebody's fault or a group or whatever? So anyway, that's kind of the role of the jury and the TD. And so we'll get right down to business here in terms of sanctions, what's out there. We have, just wanted to kind of update you on this. Obviously we have the verbal warning. This verbal warning, I just want to bring this up because it is actually becoming more important and more used on the World Cup and higher level races. It kind of went away. Like it wasn't even, there was no paperwork, there was no nothing. You just issued a verbal warning at the finish line and you were done with it. Now at the World Cup level and in the higher FIS levels, it's being used a lot more, which I think is good. It's easy. It's not really binding, and its consequences are fairly low, but it does issue a warning to an athlete or a coach that you are being watched and you are on the edge. Whatever you just did is really on the edge, and be careful next time. So I'm a big fan of the verbal warning. Very little paperwork involved, if any at all. The written warning, the yellow card, that's a little more serious, obviously. That stays on your record, for lack of a better term. If you get a second one in a season, it's automatic disqualification. So if you get a yellow card at the beginning of the season, that can be kind of detrimental, obviously. And we actually do have physical yellow plastic cards, just like in soccer. And I don't really know how that came about, but it's kind of entertaining. We carry around these cards with us, just like a referee in a soccer game. And then obviously DSQ, we'll talk a bit more about this later. That's obviously, used for the most serious infractions and is not issued unless there was a clear advantage to the offender or serious consequences or, quite serious unsportsmanlike types activities. So then competition suspension, it's kind of like a DSQ, except, it usually happens in sprint heats where you're just RAL relegated as last in the sprint heat. And then of course we got time penalties, and we'll talk about, this is actually a new rule. Time penalties now can be used, or they're mostly used in stage events and mini tours, but they are now can be used in team events, team relays and sprints. And we'll talk about that in a second. Just some information, this is cut and pasted right from the sanction form that gets issued to FIS at the end of a race. These are the most common sanctions out there, but by far the most common sanctions are obstruction and violation of classic technique. So that's, skating in a classic race. Those are like 97% of sanctions out there. Other than that, you get the odd, early start, false start in sprint heats, skiing off course once in a while, did not wear proper identification. That happens sometimes, mostly at like younger events, wrong bid, wrong transponder, stuff like that. So just wanted to kind of point that out, what's going on out there. I did this presentation last week. Actually, you know what? It was Monday for a small group of athletes and coaches. And they asked me to actually remind the group of a couple of rules that have been around for a while. And I just assumed everybody knew. But apparently, we had a time trial here a couple of weeks ago on the Frozen Thunder. And a lot of people apparently were tracking, but no one was moving. And then I find out later, it's a lot of, I'll call them kids, didn't have a clue about the tracking rule, and you have to get out of the way if somebody comes up behind you in an interval start race. So this is just a reminder, your next team meeting, and especially I would imagine the younger categories, you might want to remind them of this. And so the tracking rule applies only in interval start races, and that includes sprint qualifier and free technique and classic races. And they did actually change the words in this. I think it was maybe a year ago, that the person being tracked has to move out of the way, even if it means stopping or stepping off the trail. Every trail is different. Conditions are different. Conditions change. it would be unfortunate if someone had to step into, waist deep powder to avoid, being tracked or whatever you want to call it. But anyway, they have to move out of the way. And the sanction actually is obstruction. It's kind of like blocking. So you might want to remind your athletes of that one. And then the other one was just the sprint heat false starts. And this has evolved a little bit over the years. And on the World Cup circuit now, they keep upgrading and improving the gates. And now the jury and TD doesn't do anything. You have to be absolutely still. And if you hit that gate, an actual alarm goes off and these lights start flashing. It's some of you may have seen this on TV, and the sanction is automatically given. So it kind of has taken the guesswork out of everything. Obviously, we don't have that in Canada or North America, I would assume. So there is still some judgment call there with the starter and the TD. But anyway, just a quick reminder here: any false start, the first false start is automatic yellow card. Second false start is automatic disqualification. This is horrendous to have to issue, because often they are truly mistakes and accidents. And it's, for a TD to DSQ somebody on the start line it's like the worst thing. So, when we have the first sprint race in a couple of weeks here in Sovereign, I assume they're doing a sprint. You might want to go over that with your athletes. And because it is, some people, they start to realize how much time is going to be between take your start position, set, and then the sound of the gun. And, they start to fall forward, hoping that the gun goes at the right time. You shouldn't do that. And a good starter will vary that gap between 1 second and maybe 2 3/4 seconds. So anyway, pass this stuff along. And also, because of the time pressures in heats, protests are not allowed to be accepted. So just a couple of old rules that have been around, but quick reminders. So the reason why we're here, new rules. These just came out in October. They are basically, compiled by a group of the top TDs in the world. We have actually lawyers that work for FIS, athlete rep on the World Cup, as well as the coach representative. So that's who kind of puts this stuff together throughout the season, and it gets announced in October. Quick one here, just like I mentioned, this is actually quite good. I've had to issue DSQs for team events, and once again, a relay is 4 people, and the whole team gets disqualified for something one person did. It just didn't seem right. So now, instead of disqualifying a team, we can just issue time penalties, which is, I think, better than nothing. I mean, 30 seconds or 15 seconds can certainly put you off the podium, but at least you're still in the race. And some of you, I'm sure you've all seen some relays that are spread out over an hour. A 30-second penalty can still keep you on the podium. But anyway, this rule I think is better for the sport, and especially the relays. So that's one there. And so this is an interesting one. This isn't, I guess you could call this a rule change, but in reality, this rule has been removed. And this is better for your athletes, and it's better for the jury, and it creates a more realistic scenario. And so the gist of it is, in the past, if you were caught skating in an interval start competition, and that means 1 push, 2 side pushes, whatever you want to call it, that was considered an advantage and usually resulted in a disqualification. So that one thing that's new with a lot of rules is, we're starting now to understand that, if something happens in the first kilometer of a 50K race, that's not realistically going to have an effect on the end result. It just isn't. That's reality. If it's in a sprint qualifier, that's different, where the total race is 3 minutes. A couple of skate pushes will make a difference. And as you know, like that top 30, I see ties all the time. So every 10th of a second matters. So anyway, we're, in a 15K race, a couple of pushes and an interval start isn't going to have a drastic effect on the event. So we're less harsh is what it really comes down to. That doesn't mean you can go out and skate, on every corner and every straightaway and think you're going to get away with it. That is not the case. Skating is still not allowed. It's still a violation. But the difference is, I'm just going to go to this chart. We use this chart for everything when it comes to decision making. Basically, in the past, when you were caught skating, you were considered an advantage over here, and that would almost always result in disqualification. And like I just said, that's maybe not fair and not realistic. So now it goes over here to no advantage, where the consequences are yellow card or verbal warning. So I think this is a good move. Like I said, you could still get a yellow card, which is not great, but often it might just result in a verbal warning, which, just kind of issues that we're watching you type of thing for your athletes. Okay, so moving on here, the biggest changes with this year's rules are around obstruction and overtaking. And it is quite, I won't lie to you, it's a bit complicated. I've changed this presentation, I don't even know how many times, to try and make it simple. And I took out slides, I added slides, I made up my own words, stuff like that. But so like I said, the group of people that has come up with this is competitors, coaches, TDs, legal experts, stuff like that. And this is a cut and paste right from the FIS presentation, where they outlined the principles of the new rules, as you can read there. At the end of the day, you still cannot obstruct. I guess the new rules maybe give more clarity on the whole thing, and so we're going to get into it here in a few minutes. And a lot of this came from athletes being in the front and feeling like they can do whatever they want. And some of you that may have seen the Klebo and Bolshinov issue, I don't know what you want to call it, shenanigans over the last couple of years. And I was fortunate enough to be there for some of that in Seafeld at World Championships happening right in front of me. And, taking best line, cutting people off, that's how a lot of this came about. And the athletes thought enough's enough. We have to make some new rules. And, skiers skiing side by side and causing trouble and stuff like that. So anyway, we'll get into it here. And before we get right into it, I just wanted to, you'll hear the word obstruction over and over and over. And nowhere does it really identify what it is. So I made this up myself about 20 minutes ago, just to give you some context. What is obstruction? And the best I could come up with, it's a skier's action that causes another skier to, you guys can obviously read, change direction, adjust speed, crash, deviate from best line. It almost always ends up negative, so it's bad. And when I say adjust speed, and I put in brackets there, stand up, you do see that sometimes. Somebody moving in front and the person behind literally has to stand up. And they do it in cycling, actually, I guess too, where you're almost using the wind to slow you down, or you basically stop forward progress, or slow forward progress. So that's just kind of an overview, like I said, in my own words, what obstruction is. Okay, so any questions yet, Ilona? Anything in the chat box? Or okay, that's good, I think. So this, I cut and pasted each little rule from the new section of the rule book, and we'll just take it one at a time here. And obviously you guys can read, and what's really new this year, and it doesn't ever show up in the rule book, is they call them explanatory notes. So you can see the text is in blue. So that is going to appear in the rule book. And it's kind of a more detailed explanation of the rule. I wish they did more of this, because some of the rules, I won't lie to you, they're a bit vague. Still, like the English translation might make it a bit confusing. So now they've added this blue text that explains the rule, which is obviously great. So competitions in front have the right to choose best line. That's been around for a while, but now it's kind of saying they don't have the right to obstruct somebody coming from behind, or they don't have the right to abuse this rule. You'll see more of it in a minute. And as more clear as this is, it's still not crystal clear. And I can almost guarantee, this time next year, these are going to be changed again. We'll take the season to learn and see how this goes. And I suspect you'll see a few more changes next year, and it might be just a few words here and there. So this is a big one that's new. And you'll see this all the time. We'll see some videos here. Competitors in front shall not obstruct competitors coming from behind. So that's kind of like cutting someone off, or kind of like blocking, or, in the past it was, well, I have the right to best line, so I can kind of do whatever I want. Well, that's changed. So the privilege shall not be abused to the detriment of other competitors. It's a lot of this best line stuff. I don't know if I got any Formula One fans on here. Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, they are going at it all the time. A lot of these rules are very similar to the Formula One world, best line on corners and stuff like that. So here's another one. So I'll show you a couple of good videos. I mean, this one's relatively straightforward. Basically, the gist of this is, if you want to pass someone, great, but you got to realize you got to make sure there's enough room to pass. And they talk about, I don't think they use the actual terms, the door closing, but you do see that a lot. And I'll show you a really good video here shortly of, the door is closing, but you're still trying to squeeze through there. And it often doesn't end well. So, I mean, and I'm not a racer and never really was at any high end level. And it's tough to think about this stuff. You're redlined, you've been going for an hour and a half. You want to get past somebody, but you do have to make the conscious decision, yes or no. I'm going to have enough room, or I know you can't predict the future, but I might have enough room, I might not, but I'm going to take the risk. It may or may not go in your favor. Easier said than done, I guess, from me sitting in front of my computer, but that is the reality. So yeah,
I have a couple of questions for you, Mike, when you're ready.
Let her rip. Yeah, go ahead.
The first one's going back to the X'd out rule. It wasn't super clear if they've changed that rule for the longer interval start races, or is it also for the sprint races?
That's a good question. I mean, we will take every case one at a time. But the gist of this is basically, like I said, in a 3-minute race, skate pushes are going to have a significant advantage versus a 2.5-hour race, like a 50K. So like I said, I'll go back by just saying this does not give anyone the green light to skate. So if you're caught skating in any interval start, you're getting a sanction, more or less. But the difference is it's probably not going to be a disqualification this time. It could be a yellow card or a verbal warning. Basically, this rule, all it means is they've taken out that word creating an advantage. If I'm the TD, and I think I can speak for quite a few, there might be some TDs on this call, skating, like I said, skating in a sprint qualification, where, tenths of a second mean the difference between first and 10th, or first and fourth, or 30th and 31st, more importantly, it's going to be, like, I don't want to say it's going to create an advantage, because that just kind of goes against this rule, but I would be extremely cautious if I were you. I hope that answers your question. And
the other one is, does intent come into consideration with obstruction calls? For example, this year, does intent come into consideration with obstruction calls? For example, if a skier falls because of a skill challenge and causes another to crash, they have obstructed.
I should have included a slide here because we do take every single case. We do use, it's like, you know, a real court of law where we look at past cases sometimes, but we do take every case at a time, at a single time. And here, I'll show you, in this chart over here, was there a rule infraction? Yes or no over here. So not possible to avoid. So if somebody crashes in front of you and you move out of the way, and in that motion take out another skier, that will certainly be taken into account. And I have to assume that you know, the sanction, if anything, would be minimal. And you know, I'll show you a video here in a minute where, you know, there was a crash and 2 people skied off course to avoid the crash. Absolutely, no one's getting a sanction for skiing off course. The option was crash and cause injury or equipment failure. So, you know, not possible to avoid. This definitely comes into play. I mean, we're not like, we are human and we have feelings, or I do. If you avoid, you know, if you cause a sanction by avoiding a crash, or, you know, you didn't have a consequence, or you're going to run into a tree or a bridge abutment, we absolutely are going to take that into consideration. And it will probably result in nothing, or just race incident. So I hope that answers the question. Okay, so yeah, this is another brand new one that's a bit interesting and is not entirely black and white. And this is, you know, when competitors are alongside, they have mutual duties not to obstruct each other. And this is, I mean, all you guys on this call probably know of, and I could say a few names, that they always just seem to end up, you know, it's usually because they're the best and they end up in the same heat, in the same final, they come into the finish at the same time, that they're always screwing around and they always end up taking each other out. This is kind of like that. So what this is getting at is, you know, if we see that again, or, you know, this time around this year, people skiing side by side basically need to know that, you know, they're side by side, they might be getting too close, you know, a corner's coming up, high speed, there has to be a mutual respect there for each other's space. And if two people take each other out, it's quite often going to end up in just a race incident, or maybe they both get disqualified or both get a sanction. But this, you know, this side-by-side business and elbows or whatever is going to be treated differently now. And once again, this sort of came about from the Norwegian, Russian, whatever you want to call it, that we've been seeing on a regular basis. And so this, like I said, this will be interesting to see how this goes on the domestic level and the World Cup level this year. So I've showed you this decision chart a couple of times now. And like I said, this changes almost every year. When it first came out, I'm guessing, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, maybe more, it was pretty basic. And just through education and, you know, infractions over a World Cup season or whatever, domestic season, we kept adding more boxes. And it, in theory, you know, hopefully the reason for that is to create a more fair environment, easier environment for us to issue a sanction or not, and basically take some of the pressure off, really, and make, like I said, make it more fair for everybody. So this year it did. The only difference this year actually is this one word in here: shared responsibilities. Everything else is the same, but it has improved over the last few years. So like I said, that was basically just, you know, this rule here, you know, 2 people coming into a corner, we can't really tell the video is bad or whatever. No one really seems to be at fault. So that shared responsibilities, race incident. And, you know, everyone on this call has been, you know, we've been around. Race incidents do happen, especially in mass starts, sprint heats. It happens where nobody's at fault. It's just an unfortunate accident. Okay, so we'll get into some video cases here. Most of these are from the World Cup. Last couple of years, there's one that's really old, but we'll start with an easy one. And some of you might have seen these on TV. Some of you might even been there. Some of you may recognize them. Some may not. I hope, I did a test run with Ilona. I hope the quality is okay. We're very fortunate on the World Cup level and in some NORAMs. We have incredible footage and software. We can watch over and over and over, slow motion, zoom in, zoom out. On the domestic level, and especially at the provincial cup level, we often do not have that luxury. And it becomes difficult, very stressful, where, you know, trying to issue a sanction or a warning or whatever and not having video, it's really tough. And so even, you know, it happens in front of your eyes, but that's it, no video. So keep that in mind when you see this over and over and over again, and you can look at things. I'll talk a little bit through this just to speed it up. Otherwise, we'll be here all night. So this is an obstruction video. It's a sprint. I believe it's a sprint final. Keep an eye. It's coming into a left-hand corner. I don't remember exactly where this is, but keep an eye on this young man here in Norwegian. I think he's bib 17. Just keep an eye on him. Things to look at, you know, who's out in front, who's coming from behind, how much space is there? You know, one of the things in that chart is, you know, like we just said, is it possible to avoid? You know, often there's 10 meters of trail, but you got people bunched up in a little tiny area because everybody wants best line. So I'll just get into it here. So we got a broken pole. Let's watch it one more time here. So this, you know, as far as the jury goes, this is about as easy as it gets in terms of issuing a sanction. I'll just talk you through it. So you got all the real estate in the world out here. I know you want to get to best line, but this Norwegian came over simply just way too close, took out the Russian. And yeah, he basically, so this one, was there a rule infraction? Yes. There was no fixed sanction. Just quickly, what I mean by this, there are a couple of rules out there that have an automatic fixed sanction, kind of like the false start in a sprint heat, where it takes kind of the guessing and the decision out. That's just what it is. So no fixed sanction. There was no advantage to the Norwegian. He broke a pole and fell. So there's obviously no advantage, but there was pretty significant consequences to the Russian. So that guy got disqualified. That's, you know, good intro to obstruction here. So that one's pretty easy. We'll have another one coming up here. This is in Davos. I've been lucky enough. I've TD'd here, I think twice, once a long time ago and once as an assistant TD. This is the sprint course. It's a 2-lap course. This is a very similar sanction, similar video, I guess, right-hand corner, but a little harder to notice and identify. So, like I said, I'll talk a little bit here. You know, keep an eye on who's in front. You got a right-hand corner coming up. You want to keep an eye on this guy right here. I don't know if he's a Finn. I can't actually tell. Another broken pole. Watch it again. So at this point, everyone's spread out. They know there's a right-hand corner coming, lots of space, everyone's happy. We're getting a little bit closer now. The corner's coming. There's not so much space anymore. And blammo. So, you know, I mean, I've been there. This is like 12 meters wide here. I know that, you know, being out here is not the best position, but there was obviously enough room. And this guy literally, yeah, unfortunately, he just came in too close and caused the crash. And if you look at the chart, it's identical to the first one. No advantage to him. He broke a pole and basically was out of the heat. But he in the process took out another skier. So he was disqualified in that one. So this one here, this is, I don't know where this is. It might, I actually don't know if it's a World Cup. This is an example. All of you now, you know that we identify these turning zones, turning technique zones now. This came out a couple of years ago. This is I put this in here. It's an example of what is expected and what the consequences are with skating outside a turning zone. It actually kind of goes for a few seconds here. I apologize for this before you actually see the skiers. They're coming somewhere. It's this old wooden bridge looks like Falloon, maybe. It's hard to say, but all right, any time now. There we go. Oh, I just restarted it. God damn it. Sorry. So keep an eye on, you'll see the turning zone end. It's very clear. There it is right there. So that
Mike,
last
could
guy.
you give us a refresher on what a turning zone is?
Oh, all right. That's like a whole separate slideshow, but you know, I'm gonna jump to the next slide real quick because it actually makes it a little easier. So turning zone is basically it's a zone where you're allowed to push with your outside ski to turn. They only exist in classic technique races. So this is a good photo actually, because this shows the end of the turning zone, but you can still see that there's tracks. So, I mean, this, in my opinion, without knowing a whole lot of what's going on here, this is bad grooming. Those tracks shouldn't be there because essentially, you know, they're still turning. You know, this could be the conditions have changed through the day. Maybe it got faster. But those, you know, these 4 tracks in this area, they should not be there. And the jury or the TD probably showed up here and moved the zone to where it became realistic, which is right there. So within that zone, so, you know, this side of it, you're allowed to push with your outside ski to turn with classic skis, essentially. Once you get past that zone, it's deemed basically an infraction. And this is a good shot. You can actually see this guy here. He's got his foot out. He's past the zone. He has done one little push. It is a very minor infraction. And so based on that, he got a verbal warning. When you've just followed the decision chart, no fixed sanction, no advantage, no consequence. So here's an example of that early question where does the advantage not apply in a sprint qualifier? Here's a good example of them being in a sprint. Well, actually they're in a heat, but you're still in the sprint. So this person just got a verbal warning, very, very minor infraction, minor sanction. I hope that explains. If you go to the FIS website under cross-country documents and search turning techniques, there's an entire PowerPoint on the turning technique zones. and there's drawings and illustrations and videos and everything. But hopefully that answers the question. But so I put this in here, just an example, what you could be faced with if you do get caught. This is really minor. I don't even know if I do a verbal warning, to be honest. Just that one little push there. Like I said, these tracks should not be there. This is not great, not great grooming. So here's another video, sprint heat free technique. This is, I don't believe this is the World Cup. You can just tell by the sponsor banners and the like ratty old bibs. So watch that a couple times. Like I said, when I'm out on the course, I don't have a camera. It's like I said, it's not a great situation, but I look at who's in front, who could potentially be coming from behind, how much space is available, and just what could possibly happen. I'm trying to think, okay, what could happen in this scenario, just so I'm prepared. So this guy, number 3, he's actually behind at this point. Remember that rule, if you intend to pass, make sure you got enough space. This one actually had a bit of discussion with a bunch of TDs around the world as to who was actually at fault here. And to be honest, if this happened this year, it could very well be shared duties. And, the end result in this was number 3 getting disqualified for trying to pass on the inside and taking out number 2. So you could beat this one to death. And like I said, I bet if this happened this year, this might be one of those shared duties thing, or hard to say. I will admit, we're not perfect and we still don't all agree on things. But anyway, just an interesting video there. So this guy's coming from, watch it one more time. He's coming from behind. There's a right-hand corner. Best line is obviously tight to the fence. Yeah. There's a video coming up here that you'll see. One guy said, well, the person in red, number 2, should have been able to stay on his feet. Being a subpar skier is actually not a rule infraction. And sometimes people forget that. So you can't say that or assume that or say, well, they should have been better or whatever. It's not a rule infraction. So anyhow, this person did get a written reprimand for that. Bib number 3. Okay, let's see here. We're getting a little bit close to the end, so bear with me here. Once again, you're kind of seeing a theme here. The majority of sanctions happen in sprint heats. That's the nature of the beast, unfortunately. Another final. Actually, I'm not sure if it's a final, but it's a heat anyway. So like I said, keep an eye. You got 3 people out front here. The person on the right, or the skier's right, is making a fairly aggressive move to pass. I believe there's a corner coming up. This may look familiar. It's almost a carbon copy of a couple of the other videos we saw here where, wanting to get that best line, but simply just coming too close to other skiers. So yeah, fairly straightforward, I believe. Yeah, so being in a sprint heat, that ends in a competition suspension, not quite a disqualification. basically like same as the rest, no advantage to the actual offender, but pretty bad consequences. Just a quick note, competition suspension, that just essentially means, you've already earned the right to get where you are. So that person will be ranked as last in that heat. So, depending, it could be 12th, could be 6th. That's basically what competition suspension means. This video is really old. I remember seeing this. I believe this is Stockholm, Sweden. I think those of you that remember the name Rob Hogg, he was chief of competition, the first World Cup here in Canmore, 2005. And I think in 2008 as well. He was the TD here. This is a city sprint, absolutely horrendous conditions. You can see by the snow, they actually got it from parking lots nearby. It was full of rocks. It was terrible. But anyway, yeah, this was a long time ago. And this is the qualifier. And so this person is outside of the tracks, and it's very subtle, but they are kind of pushing mostly with the right ski. Actually, it's a bit of the left ski as well. And this goes back to the question that the person asked there a minute ago about advantage and skating. It is very subtle. This, believe it or not, like this was the olden days. This person got disqualified back then. And this would definitely not be a disqualification this time around, this year. And I want to show you this photo. There's in the FIS website under CC cross country documents, there is, oh, what the hell is that? There is an entire PowerPoint on classic technique violation. This is one of the slides, and you can see, they're double pulling in between the tracks, and the right ski is kind of pushing off to the side. That is considered a violation. So, depending on the jury, whether or not that would result in a disqualification this year, difficult to say. But back then, it was a disqualification. It was considered an advantage. Okay, so it's here's a good one. This is like, another example of trying to pass when there just simply isn't enough room. Everybody's outside the tracks here. This is a jury's worst nightmare. Like anytime the snow is faster outside the tracks, and it does happen a lot. Everybody's outside the tracks. It's good God, what is this? We're just on pins and needles because your skis have a tendency to flail all over the place sometimes, and bad things happen. But anyway, we'll play this video. Keep an eye on the guy in the blue on the far left. He's trying to pass. There just is not enough room. And so this, we'll watch it one more time. Oops, sorry. A couple of TDs thought that, this person might have moved over a little bit, could sense him coming from behind, intentionally blocked. That was not the majority thought process on this one, but, the door has closed, and and like the other ones there was no advantage to the person, the offender, because he crashed, and this resulted in a disqualification. All right, we got two more videos here, and these ones are interesting. So this is in Valmarster, Sweden, I believe. I've never been there. I don't know if anyone else on the call has. Apparently this hill is notorious for crashes and problems. It's fast. It's like a S chicane. It's steep. It gets icy, which is kind of crappy for everybody. If it's, resulting in a significant number of crashes. This is the women's final. This particular video was a horrendous discussion and was split probably down the middle, 50-50 in terms of result with the FIS TDs around the world. So we'll play it a few times here. So focus on these two. This gal is coming from behind and is trying to pass. So I suspect it's probably a bit icy, really fast. People are kind of, they're not snow plowing, but it's, I mean, I imagine I'd be off in the bushes somewhere if I were coming down this hill at full speed. Simply, this gal starts to go a bit wide and makes contact with this person and they go down. You guys can, generate your own thoughts on this. I'd be happy if someone wants to unmute and give me their thoughts, by all means. At the FIS level, like half the group said this was just a race incident, unfortunate part of skiing. I would say the other half felt that the skier here in the blue swung wide, did not hold their line and caused the crash. So the actual sanction was a written warning for this skier here, which, with today's rules, hard to say how this could, maybe it was a shared duties thing and it was just ended in a race incident. Some said that this skier that went down was unstable on her feet and should have stayed upright. Like I said, being a poor skier is not a sanction. And this is the women's sprint final. I don't know if I'd go as far to say is that he was a poor skier. But anyway, just some interesting discussion there.
Mike, in a sprint heat, can an obstructed competitor be advanced to the next heat?
Yes. So that good question, and I should have included that. That came up in the discussion. I personally have done that, I think twice. I did it once at Nationals in Whitehorse. But the reality is and the top TDs in the world basically said you would never ever see that at a World Cup level. But this could be, this happened at the domestic level or something untelevised. You could definitely do that. It is a rule. It's still in the ICR, and you could definitely do that. But the jury, or whoever did say in our call there a couple of weeks ago, that would never happen at the World Cup. It's often just not. You don't see it very often. I think I've seen it 3 times in my life. Another TD did it, and I think Ken Hewitt did it once. I think he's on this call. I did it twice. I did it once at Arctic Winter Games and Nationals. That poor 7th person, starting at the back of the bus. I guess it's better than nothing, but they're at a hell of a disadvantage. That's for sure. Okay, so this next video is at the exact same location. And it's 2 Russians, same location, same hill. They are moving a bit faster. Little different scenarios. Yeah. So we'll watch it a couple times. So like I said over and over again, pay attention to who's out in front. What could possibly be happening? Is there going to be an overtaking? Stuff like that. It's and actually here's a good example of that rule where this guy here skied way off course to avoid the crash. And obviously there was no sanction there at, we just, it's unrealistic, but. So this did end up in a disqualification for this Russian right here. And the thought process behind that was trying to pass on the inside where there was not space. So yeah, when you look at the flow chart kind of thing here, there was an infraction, no fixed sanction, no advantage because he crashed, but there was a consequence for the other Russian, which resulted in disqualification. So that comes to the end. I mean, I have thousands of these videos and could go on and on all day about them, but I changed my conclusions here a few times, but like the theme, I hope this was helpful. I wanted to keep it under an hour, but I'm at an hour and 2 minutes. Like I said, be aware of your surroundings. I did put this in here. If you're out of the tracks, be very cautious. Bad things happen when don't get me wrong. Lots of people are very capable of skiing properly outside the tracks, but things sometimes go sideways. Where contrary to some belief, the jury and the TDs are not out to get people. Giving sanctions is not fun. I've had all ages burst into tears in front of me. I've been threatened once. And at the World Cup level, it can get really ugly. Things can end up in court. Years ago, Justina Kowalchuk cut off Keegan Randall in a sprint final. That went to the highest level of court. That was not fun. The documentation was 60 pages on that. Things went to court out of Seefeld 2019 that I think it was Bolchanov or Ustikov and Klebel that ended up in court. I actually had the best English, which is scary. So I prepared some of the documents. It's up till 2 o'clock in the morning. Like, we don't enjoy any of this stuff, trust me. And so anyway, we're always trying to make it more fair. And I did put this in here. Like, I don't want athletes to, hang back and get scared or whatever. You got to be aggressive. You're there to win, but be smart. And heaven forbid, go on a website and read some rule books once in a while. It's your sport. It's your life. There's trials coming up, especially on Olympic years, things get more and more stressful. I'm glad I'm not the TD at trials here in a few weeks or a couple of months. But anyway, that's that. If anyone has any questions, feel free to just take yourself off mute or in the chat box or whatever, or send me an email separately, or I'm always here in Canmore and we'll respond pretty quick to this stuff. Anything? Either everyone hung up or I did a terrible job or I did a really good job. I don't know, but
I got one for you, Mike.
All right.
So what's the reasoning by not advancing people in heats? I mean, they do it all the time in short track speed skating.
It has to do with, I'm going to take off presentation here. Let's see who I'm talking to here.
Jim Hendry.
A lot of it comes down to they feel that person has no chance. To be honest, a lot of these rules have to do with television, and at the World Cup level, it's, like I said, I've done it twice. You can absolutely do it, but it will not happen at the World Cup level. And I can't give you a really hard and fast answer. I can't speak to speed skating. I don't know why they do it there and they don't do it in in sprint heats, but you know, this isn't a great excuse, but often there isn't enough room, especially in city sprints. But anyway, I know that's not a great answer. A lot of it has to do with television, to be honest. And they're just not interested in doing that.
Okay, here's another quick one. Is there a fixed sanction for double polling in a classic technique zone?
No, there is not. There's only a fixed sanction in a couple of spots, and it's mostly false starts and early starts.
Okay.
So like, you know how you have the set 6-second window to start? If you start outside that window in advance, it's automatic 15-second penalty.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's very few areas where there's a fixed sanction.
So there was an incident that I'm aware of. It was a 50K race, and somebody did 2 double polls in a classic technique zone and was disqualified off the podium. That seems, to your rule that you discussed, does that really have such a consequence? That seems like maybe this year, maybe that shouldn't have happened, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that seems pretty harsh. I would ask a couple of questions, like what was it in the last hill before the finish? And did that person gain a position? I would ask those 2 questions. I don't know the answer, but based on, you know, this year's rules, that I can't see that happening. So yeah, I hope that gives you some clarity. And I think, you know, that's one of the reasons why we have this new rule, because that's crazy. Like for two double polls in that zone, that's a bit much. So yeah, hopefully, do you know the consequences? Like I could see, you know, if the hill is 300 meters from the finish, and if that person maybe got in front of somebody else, that's different. But I don't know the consequences, or sorry, the situation.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
We have a question in the chat box for you, Mike. What can the consequences be for one of the shared responsibility situation?
Typically, well, we don't know yet because this rule is brand new, but it would probably end up in race incident. So like in that flow chart I showed you a few times, under that green box, if you end up over there, under that box, it says shared responsibilities. If you find yourself there, the next box down is race incident. So that's, you know, like I said, 2 people jostling for position who just get tangled up. And you know that expression, it takes 2 to tango. There you go. So that's, I have to assume that's what the majority of what things will end up in. This year is going to be interesting, and you know, I'm anxious to see what some of these sanctions might look like on the World Cup. So hopefully that answers your question.
Mike, it's Todd Harris speaking. I'm just wondering if you have an opinion about what would have happened in that 50K final with Klæbo if the 3 new rules that seem to all apply to that situation were in place.
Do you know which one are we talking about? Because there's a couple. So the one in last year's World Championships, is that the one?
Yes, that's the one I was thinking of.
So this rule, so that one, I've watched the video 85 times. We've talked about it. That was a clear obstruction. Klæbo was trying to pass on the outside and did not have, it was a right-hand corner coming into the finish. Klæbo was coming from behind, was passing out on the right. It was one of those, did not have the space. I mean, I can pull the video up here pretty quick, but to me, and that actual sanction was a legit obstruction. That one was not really one of these shared responsibilities, in my opinion, and the opinion of quite a few others. The one where it started was in Seefeld. The 2 of them, well, yeah, the rules have changed a bit, but obviously, but the 2 of them were kind of side by side on a right-hand corner. Ustikov was coming, or I can't remember who it was coming from behind. They were side by side for a while, and and they went down. So yeah, but that was my opinion on the one in World Championships.
Right. I was just wondering if the one rule about the person in front having to be mindful of someone who's coming up behind them and can't use their best line in order to obstruct someone else, whether that would have come into play at the World Championship one.
Yeah, like I said, unfortunately, different TDs do have different opinions. That particular incident, I'm probably going to watch the video here when I hang up, but Klebo was trying to squeeze in between Bolshinov and the V boards, and they were literally to the right of the 4 tracks. And yeah, it could maybe go a different way, but that one was clear obstruction in the TD at that point, in their mind, of the jury.
Great, thank you. I assumed that was the case, but I just wanted to make sure I was understanding these new rules, and that I wasn't going to be confused by them being applied in future. So thanks.
No sweat. All
We have
right.
another question.
Okay.
When Bolshinov declares a best line, is he allowed to use blocking the skier behind? As why?
I mean, no one's allowed to use blocking. That's kind of a bad word. And so, I'm going to share my screen again. Just, can you, just a sec here. Let's see here. Yeah, so best line, so this rule kind of applies to your question, I guess. Competitors in front have the right to choose their best line. So they generally do not, you can read these explanatory notes here, that's where some of these rules, and like I said, this year is going to be really interesting to see how this sort of plays out. They're almost a little bit contradicting. It's like, do this, you can get away with this, but only if you don't do that. So basically, they don't see competitors coming from behind, but you can't obstruct somebody coming from behind. So you have the right to best line, but as long as you're not closing the door on somebody coming from behind. I know this isn't clear, and I apologize for not being able to answer your question, but these are the rules that have been published. And example, abruptly changing the line or unduly, some of this English is weird, but so yeah, like it's, you have the right to best line, but as long as you don't impede somebody else. So definitely you cannot use blocking. I hope that makes it a little more clear for you, maybe, but one of, these cases will all be looked at individually by the jury that's there at the time.
I think I'll field one more question and then we can call it a night.
Sure.
If there is a clear case of obstruction, but for luck, there is no consequence, can there be a sanction?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so there was an infraction. I guess it's a good question. If there was an infraction, there has to be a sanction, because if not, then it just becomes a race incident. So that, no advantage, no consequence could easily just be a verbal warning. Sometimes it could be a verbal warning to 2 people. But so yeah, like we try and go back to this decision chart every time to keep things, consistent across the entire, not just the World Cup, like everywhere that there's FIS races or any races for that matter. So I hope that answers your question. If there isn't, if an infraction, there has to be a sanction. But if not, then yeah, clearly it just becomes a race incident.
If anyone has any other questions, feel free to reach out via email. thank you so much for spending your time with us tonight, and thank you, Mike, for your presentation. And with that, I think we'll call it an evening.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you, Mike.
everyone for coming on out to this. It'd be nice, maybe we do this every year, or sometimes, during the ICR updates, there's virtually no changes where, it's not really necessary to do this. Or I'm sure someone might, whoever the TD is in Sovereign, I guess she should know this, but I don't remember. They might go over some of this stuff, first race of the year. Hopefully they don't take an hour of your time at the TCM, but anyway, yeah, we'll see what the season looks like. Good luck, everybody. Have fun out there. I'll see you at Nationals. I'll see you in Canmore. Yeah, good luck and stay upright.